Ayanna. This must be it.
You paid for me. Now finish it. But what he discovered next shattered everything. They don't write songs about the kind of evil that hides behind money and power. Not out here. Not under this Sunday. Out here, it's silent, quiet like a coffin. And when something bad happens, it doesn't scream. It just arrives uninvited and waits for someone full enough to open the door. That night, General Grant's men opened many doors. The windowless room deep within Grant's makeshift fortress in Redstone Gulch lay still in near darkness, illuminated only by a single oil lamp casting long shadows across stone walls. A young Native American woman sat bound to a rough-hewn wooden chair, her head slumped forward, dark hair obscuring her face. Her simple, hand-stitched leather dress hung in tatters, revealing bruised skin beneath. General Grant stood before her, his military uniform discarded for a simple black vest over a crisp white shirt. His silver pocket watch glinted as he checked the time with practiced nonchalance. "Last chance, Ayanna." His voice carried no urgency, no anger, just cold certainty. "Where is the rest of the map? Where is your daughter hiding it?" Ayanna raised her head slowly, revealing a face once vibrant, now marred by a split lip and swollen eye. Still, her gaze held defiance. "I've told you," she whispered, her voice a cracked imitation of the wind. "There is no map." Grant sighed as if disappointed by a child's poor performance. He nodded to a man standing in the shadows. "Mark her." The burly man stepped forward, holding an iron rod with a glowing end. The smell of heated metal filled the room as Ayanna's eyes widened. She struggled against her restraints as the man moved behind her, tearing the back of her dress open with one rough motion. "The general paid good money for you," the man growled. "Now you belong to him and to anyone he decides to sell you to." The rod descended. Ayanna's scream echoed through the fortress's stone foundation, but the thick walls ensured no one in Redstone Gulch would hear. Grant watched dispassionately, then leaned close to her ear. "When you're ready to tell me about the map and your daughter, you can be returned. Until then, you'll be delivered to your new owner. Perhaps he'll have better luck making you talk." As consciousness faded, Ayanna's last thought was of her daughter's face and of the man she'd heard about, a former Union scout who lived alone in the desert. A man who might be her only hope. Dawn broke harsh and sudden over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in violent strokes of orange and crimson. Miles McAllister stood on the weathered porch of his ranch house, watching the sun climb over distant mountains. The cup of black coffee in his hand had gone cold, forgotten as he lost himself in the empty landscape. Redstone Gulch lay 5 miles to the east, but it might as well have been another world. Out here it was just Miles, his horses, and the ghost that followed him from the war. He was 45 now, though the lines etched into his face and the silver threading his dark hair suggested older. Tall and lean, he moved with the careful precision of a man who had learned that quick movements could get you killed. The desert had taught him patience. The war had taught him everything else. His eyes, pale blue and sharp as a hawk's, caught movement along the fence line. A wagon, small and battered, sat near his eastern boundary. No driver visible, just a mule tied to the post, looking as resigned to its fate as any creature Miles had ever seen. Something twisted in his gut, that old instinct that had kept him alive through years of scouting behind enemy lines. Something wasn't right. He set the coffee cup down and retrieved his Winchester rifle from inside the door. The weight of it felt familiar in his hands as he made his way down the porch steps, boots crunching on the hard-packed earth. The morning heat already pressed down as he approached the wagon, rifle ready but not raised. 20 yards out, he stopped, studying the scene. No tracks leading away from the wagon, just the mule, the wagon, and something in the back covered by canvas. Miles circled carefully, scanning the horizon for any sign of watchers. Finding none, he approached the wagon from the side, catching the smell before he reached it. Blood, sweat, and something worse. Human misery had a scent all its own, one he remembered well from battlefield hospitals. A note had been tucked into the rope securing the canvas. Debt paid in full. Miles pulled back the covering, the rough material scraping against his calloused fingers. Beneath lay a woman, curled on her side, wrists bound with rope. Her dress was torn, exposing a back crossed with wounds, both fresh and healing. And there, burned into her skin between her shoulder blades, a single word: sin. For a moment, Miles stood frozen. A flood of memories threatened to drown him. Villages burning, women screaming, orders he'd followed because a uniform meant leaving your conscience at the door. The woman stirred, eyelids fluttering. She looked at him through a haze of pain, her cracked lips parting. "You paid for me," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "Now finish it." Miles didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He simply stood there staring as the sun climbed higher and the desert grew hotter around them. Because the truth is, some men fight wars and think they've seen hell. But hell isn't a battlefield. Hell is a human being dropped off at your door, carved up and left to rot while somebody out there thinks they've done you a favor. Miles carried the woman into his house, ignoring the blood that seeped into his shirt. He laid her gently on the bed in his spare room, a space that hadn't seen a visitor in years. The sheets were clean, but smelled of dust and disuse. He worked methodically, cutting away the ropes at her wrists, cleaning her wounds with whiskey and water. She drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally whimpering, but never fully waking. Her skin burned with fever. As he tended to her back, he studied the brand more closely. Sin. A simple word for such a deliberate cruelty. The burn was fresh, maybe a day old, the skin around it angry and inflamed. In the war, he'd seen men branded as deserters. During his time as a government operative afterward, he'd seen worse done to men and women alike. But there was something personal about this, something that spoke of hatred beyond mere punishment. Miles had no illusions about healing. He could clean wounds, stitch cuts, set bones, skills learned on battlefields and in wilderness camps. But healing the kind of wounds this woman carried would take more than whiskey and bandages. Still, he worked through the morning and into the afternoon, applying salve to her back, wrapping clean strips of cloth around her torso, coaxing water between her lips when she seemed aware enough to swallow. By sunset, he had done all he could. The woman slept, her breathing shallow but steady. Miles sat in a chair by the window, rifle across his knees, watching the road that led to his ranch. Someone had brought her here specifically. Debt paid in full, the note had said. But Miles owed no debts he knew of, and certainly none that would be paid with a half-dead woman. As darkness fell, he lit a single lamp, keeping it low. Years of scouting had taught him the value of darkness, how it could conceal and protect. The lamp cast just enough light for him to see the woman's face. In repose, with the dirt and blood washed away, he could see she had once been beautiful, still was perhaps, beneath the bruising and exhaustion. Miles didn't know her story, but he knew enough of the world to guess at parts of it. Redstone Gulch might put on airs of civilization these days, but underneath the veneer of law and order, the same predators still hunted. Only now they wore suits and carried ledgers instead of six-shooters. The woman stirred, murmuring something unintelligible. Her eyes opened briefly, unfocused, searching the room. "Sarah," she whispered. "My little girl." Then she was gone again, pulled back into unconsciousness. Miles remained in the chair all night, watching, waiting. Dawn found him still there, eyes red-rimmed, but alert. He rose stiffly, muscles protesting the night in the hard chair. Outside, he checked his horses, fed the mule that had pulled the wagon, then climbed the small rise behind his house. From there, he could see for miles in every direction. And there, just at the edge of his vision, he spotted a glint of light reflecting off glass, someone watching through a spyglass or binoculars. The figure was too distant to make out clearly, but Miles had no doubt they were watching his ranch. The game, whatever it was, had begun, and Miles had been pulled into it without his consent. But if there was one thing Miles McAllister knew how to do, it was survive games where other people made the rules. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. For 3 days, The woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Miles changed her bandages, spooned broth into her mouth when she could swallow, and kept watch. The distant observer appeared each morning, watching for an hour before disappearing. Miles considered riding out to confront them, but couldn't leave his patient unattended. On the fourth morning, Miles returned from feeding the horses to find the woman sitting up in bed, eyes clear for the first time. She flinched when he entered, pressing herself against the headboard. "You're safe," he said, keeping his distance, his voice rusty from disuse. "No one's going to hurt you here." She studied him, eyes moving from his weathered face to his calloused hands, then to the rifle he'd propped by the door. "Where am I?" Her voice was stronger now, though still ragged. "My ranch, 5 miles west of Redstone Gulch." Miles pulled the chair farther from the bed before sitting, giving her space. "You were left in a wagon at my fence line 4 days ago." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by a flash of something calculation, perhaps. "You didn't send for me." Miles shook his head. "No. Note said debt paid in full, but I don't know what debt." She looked down at her hands, now free of rope, but still marked with angry red welts. "My name is Ayanna. I am the daughter of the Apache chief." She raised her eyes to his. "And you're Miles McAllister, former cavalry scout, served under General Sherman." Miles stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Everyone in Redstone Gulch knows about the reclusive ex-soldier who trains horses and never comes to town." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But I know more because my father, my late father, was a chief who prepared for the Great War of the White Men. He collected stories, and your story was in his memory." "And what's your story, Ayanna?" Miles kept his voice neutral, though suspicion had flared inside him. This was no random delivery. Ayanna's eyes darted to the window, then back to Miles. "I was arrested 2 moons ago. The charge was false, interfering with the general's men. My father had been investigating General Grant's men for stealing our land. After he was killed, I continued asking questions." Her voice faltered. "They took my daughter, Little Feather. She's 7. I don't know where she is now." Miles remained silent, waiting. "General Grant said I was to be made an example of. He sold me like property." Her hand unconsciously moved to her back, where the brand lay hidden beneath bandages. "But I arranged it. I made sure I was sold to you." "Why me?" "Because you were a scout. Because you know how to fight. Because you've killed men before." Her eyes hardened. "And because I need someone who can help me find my daughter and stop Grant before he destroys more lives." Miles stood abruptly, moving to the window. "You've made a mistake. I'm not that man anymore. I don't fight other people's battles. This became your battle the moment they left me at your door," Ayanna said quietly. "Grant knows I'm here. He'll come for me and for you. You're involved whether you want to be or not." Miles turned back to her, his expression grim. "Then I'll deal with Grant if he comes here. But I'm not going to Redstone Gulch looking for trouble." Ayanna watched him for a long moment, then reached for the cup of water by the bed. As she did, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a small paper tucked into the lining of her dress. It slipped out, falling onto the blanket. Miles saw it before she could hide it. A child's drawing of a woman and a girl holding hands with the words, "I love you, Mama," written in uneven letters. Ayanna quickly tucked the drawing away, but not before Miles had seen the naked pain in her eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in his own reflection for years after the war, after losing his family while he was away fighting other men's battles. "Rest," he said more gently. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." As he left the room, Miles knew he was already being pulled into something he'd spent years trying to avoid. The world he'd left behind had found him again, bringing all its violence and cruelty to his doorstep. But this time, it had brought something else, too. A woman with the same haunted eyes he saw in the mirror, and a child lost in the crossfire. Miles had failed to save his own family. Perhaps this was his chance to atone. As Ayanna regained her strength over the next few days, Miles kept his distance, providing food and fresh bandages, but avoiding conversation. He spent his days tending the horses, watching the horizon for observers who continued to appear each morning, and thinking. At night, he sat on the porch, a bottle of whiskey, his only company. The desert stretched before him, vast and indifferent, stars scattered like spilled salt across the black sky. In the stillness, memories crept in, memories he had spent years trying to outrun. Villages burning along Sherman's march to the sea. The screams, the silent aftermath. Then later, after the war, the government work tracking down deserters, Confederate officials, and hiding arms dealers. The blood on his hands had never quite washed off. On the sixth evening, Ayanna joined him on the porch. She moved carefully, her wound still painful, but healing. Without asking, she sat in the second chair, the one that had remained empty for years. They sat in silence for a long while, watching darkness claim the desert. "Why did you come out here?" she finally asked. "After the war, after everything, why choose this place?" Miles took a sip of whiskey, considering whether to answer. The question seemed innocent enough, but he sensed deeper currents. "Wanted emptiness," he said finally. "Spent too long around people. Needed space to hear myself think." "And what did you hear?" Miles glanced at her, surprised by the question. Most people didn't probe this way. "Nothing good," he admitted. "That's why I stay out here. Keep the devils contained." Ayanna nodded, as if his answer confirmed something for her. "My father was like that at first," she said softly. "He fought the war as a young warrior, saw terrible things, came back changed." She looked down at her hands. "But he found his way back. Through words. Through seeking truth." "Truth is overrated," Miles said. "Mostly just hurts people. Lies hurt more, in the end." They fell silent again. An owl called from somewhere nearby, its cry lonely in the darkness. "There's a rider watching your ranch," Ayanna said suddenly. "Every morning on the eastern ridge." Miles nodded. "I've seen him. It's one of Grant's men. They're making sure I'm here." She turned to face him. "They'll come eventually, when they think I'm well enough to talk." "What do they think you know?" Ayanna hesitated, weighing her words carefully. "Grant isn't just corrupt. He's looking for something, a treasure from the Civil War. Union gold that was hidden when they retreated from Confederate forces in this territory." Her voice dropped lower. "My father found part of a map. I hid it with Little Feather before they took me, in her doll. Grant wants it." Miles studied her face in the dim light. "Is that the real reason you arranged to be sent here? You think I can help you find this treasure?" "No," Ayanna said firmly. "I want my daughter back. Nothing else matters. But Grant won't stop looking for that map, and Little Feather won't be safe until he's exposed or stopped." The implications hung in the air between them. "I'm not an assassin," Miles said quietly. "I'm not asking you to be." Ayanna's eyes gleamed in the darkness. "I'm asking you to help me save my daughter, to fight one more battle for someone who can't fight for themselves." Miles stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the porch, his back to Ayanna. He spoke, his voice low and rough. "I had a son once, and a wife. They died of fever while I was away hunting a man the government wanted found." He gripped the porch railing. "I was good at finding people. Too good. And while I was tracking a stranger across Tennessee, my own family needed me." He turned to face her. "So don't talk to me about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Sometimes the people who need you most are the ones you've already failed." Ayanna didn't flinch from his anger. "Then help me not fail my daughter." Miles didn't answer. He picked up the whiskey bottle and walked into the darkness beyond the house. Ayanna watched him go, then reached into her dress lining and pulled out her daughter's drawing. In the faint light from the house, she traced her finger over the childish lines, a single tear trailing down her cheek. Miles didn't return until dawn, his clothes damp with dew, his eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. He found Ayanna in the kitchen, attempting to prepare breakfast despite her injuries. "Sit," he said gruffly. "I'll do that." She obeyed, watching as he expertly cracked eggs into a pan, sliced bread, and brewed coffee. He moved with efficient precision, a man accustomed to caring for himself. "I'm riding into town today," he announced, as he set a plate before her. "Need supplies." Ayanna looked up sharply. "You shouldn't go alone. Grant's men need to see me living my normal life. If I hide, they'll know something's wrong. Then I'm coming with you." Miles shook his head. You're not strong enough yet, and you'd be recognized. I need to find out about Little Feather, please." The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Miles sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'll ask around carefully, but you stay here." He fixed her with a stern look. "There's a shotgun under my bed. Anyone comes who isn't me, you use it. Understood?" Ayanna nodded, relief and fear mingling in her expression. Miles finished his breakfast in silence, then prepared for the ride to town. He dressed in his usual attire, worn denims, cotton shirt, leather vest, but added a gun belt with a Colt revolver. Not his preferred weapon, but necessary for town. The Winchester rifle went into a saddle holster. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone." Ayanna nodded, then asked, "What if you don't come back?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. "Then ride west," Miles said simply. "Keep going till you hit California. Start over." With that, he was gone, mounting his bay gelding and riding toward Redstone Gulch. The town had changed since Miles had last visited months ago. New buildings stood where empty lots had been a sign of Redstone Gulch's continued growth despite the decline in silver mining. The main street bustled with activity: merchants, miners, cowboys, and the occasional well-dressed businessman. Miles tied his horse outside the general store and went about his business with practiced efficiency, purchasing flour, coffee, ammunition, and medical supplies. He kept his interactions brief, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. At the saloon, he paused. The Redstone Saloon was the center of the town's information network, a place where gossip flowed as freely as whiskey. If he wanted news about Grant or Ayanna's daughter, this was where to start. The saloon was dim and smoky inside, sparsely populated in the early afternoon. Miles ordered a whiskey and took it to a corner table, back to the wall where he could observe the room. He didn't have to wait long. A stooped figure approached, moving with the careful gait of the elderly. Well, well, the hermit emerges from his cave. Miles looked up into the watery eyes of Rattlesnake Jack, once the most feared gambler in the territory, now a shadow of his former self. Arthritis had whittled him down, but his mind remained sharp. "Jack," Miles acknowledged with a nod. "Take a seat if you're going to." The old man eased himself into a chair, wheezing slightly. "Must be something important to bring you to town. You're about as social as a rattlesnake with a toothache." Miles allowed a small smile. "Just supplies." "Bullshit," Jack said cheerfully. "You've got that look. The one that says you're hunting." Miles took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Just curious about some things happening in town, such as General Grant. Heard he's been busy lately." Jack's expression sobered. "Grant's always busy building his little empire." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Word is, he's been acquiring property, and not just land, people." Miles kept his face neutral. "Slavery's been over a while now, Jack. Tell that to the women who go missing or the workers who disappear from the mines." Jack coughed a wet, rattling sound. "Grant calls it indentured servitude when anyone dares to question. But everyone knows what it really is. Anyone standing against him." Jack's laugh turned into another cough. "The sheriff, he's in Grant's pocket. The newspaper, the last editor who asked questions, ended up dead in an alley. Robbery gone wrong, they said." Thomas Morgan Miles thought grimly. "What about family members? Anyone looking for these missing people?" "Some try. Most get bought off or scared away." Jack studied Miles intently. "You asking for a particular reason? Someone you know gone missing?" Miles shrugged. "Just curious why the law allows it." "Law is what men with power say it is," Jack said bitterly. "Always has been." Miles finished his whiskey. "One more question. You hear anything about a little girl? About 7 years old, named Little Feather? Might have been taken by Grant or his men." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're playing with fire, Miles. Just answer the question." Jack sighed. "Grant's got a place outside town. Big house with lots of guards. Rumor is he keeps special guests there. Could be your girl is there if Grant took her." Miles nodded, placing a coin on the table. "Thanks, Jack." As he stood to leave, Jack grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Whatever you're planning, don't Grant is not just a corrupt general. He's got connections all the way to the governor. And he's obsessed with finding something, some old treasure. A man like that, with that kind of obsession and power. Jack shook his head. He'll kill anyone who gets in his way. Miles gently removed Jack's hand. I'll keep that in mind. Outside, Miles mounted his horse and rode slowly through town, memorizing the layout, noting changes since his last visit. As he passed the courthouse, he saw a figure watching from an upper window, a tall man in a black suit, his face partially obscured by the reflection on the glass. General Grant, Miles guessed, already aware of his presence in town. The ride back to the ranch was tense. Miles constantly checked for followers. None materialized, but the feeling of being watched never left him. As he approached his property, movement caught his eye. A rider on the eastern ridge, the Watcher. But this time, instead of staying distant, the figure turned and rode directly toward Miles's ranch. Miles spurred his horse to a gallop, racing to intercept the rider before they reached the house. His hand went to the Winchester, pulling it smoothly from its holster as he rode. The two riders converged in a cloud of dust 100 yards from the ranch house. Miles raised his rifle, aimed at the stranger's chest. "That's far enough," he called. The rider stopped, raising empty hands slowly. "I'm not here to fight, McAllister." The man was a Native American, older than Miles by perhaps a decade, his face deeply lined, long gray hair tied back. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle. "Who are you?" Miles demanded, rifle still raised. "My people call me Eagle Eye." The man's voice was calm, his English perfect but accented. "I've been watching you and the woman, because Grant's men are also watching, and because I have been waiting for you to remember who you are." The man lowered his hand slowly. "You were once a warrior who fought for what he believed in. I think perhaps you will be again." Miles frowned. "You know nothing about me." "I know more than you think, Miles McAllister." Eagle Eye's dark eyes seemed to pierce through him. "I know you served under Sherman. I know you burned villages, and I know you have tried to bury those memories here in the desert." Miles's finger tightened on the trigger. "How do you know these things?" "Because I was there," Eagle Eye said simply. "My village was one of those your soldiers burned. I watched from the hills as my home turned to ash." A cold knot formed in Miles's stomach. "If you're here for revenge, get on with it." Eagle Eye shook his head. "If I wanted you dead, you would be already. I have had many chances over the years." A faint smile touched his lips. "I have been watching you for a very long time, Miles McAllister. Waiting for what? For you to wake up, to remember that running from the past does not erase it." Eagle Eye nodded toward the ranch house. "That woman brought your past back to you, and now you must choose. Continue hiding, or stand and fight." Miles lowered his rifle slightly, confusion replacing anger. "What's your stake in this?" "Grant has taken land from my people, killed those who resisted, and now he searches for something that does not belong to him, something sacred." Eagle Eye's expression hardened. "The treasure he seeks is not gold as he believes. It is proof documents that show this land was given to the Apache by treaty. Documents the government would prefer remain lost." Miles's mind raced, connecting pieces. "And you think Grant has these documents?" "No, he has part of a map. The woman's father found it, I believe. But there are other pieces." Eagle Eye reached slowly into his saddlebag and withdrew something wrapped in buckskin. "Like this one." He unwrapped it, revealing a yellowed piece of paper with partial markings, what appeared to be part of a map. "Together, these pieces will lead to the documents and to the gold that was hidden with them. Grant wants the gold. I want the documents." Eagle Eye rewrapped the paper carefully. "The woman wants her child. I think perhaps we can help each other." Miles studied the Apache, weighing his words. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Eagle Eye said bluntly. "Trust must be earned, but we have a common enemy, and time grows short. Grant will move soon, either against you directly or against those who might help you." As if to punctuate his words, a gunshot echoed from the direction of the ranch house. Then another. Miles wheeled his horse around, heart pounding. Ayanna. He spurred his horse into a gallop, racing toward the house, aware of Eagle Eye following close behind. The front door of the ranch house stood open. Miles dismounted in a fluid motion, rifle raised, and moved swiftly to the entrance. Inside, he found Ayanna standing in the main room, the shotgun in her hand, smoke still curling from the barrel. On the floor lay a man, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. "He came through the window," Ayanna said, her voice remarkably steady. "Said Grant sent him to bring me back." She looked up at Miles, her eyes hard. "I told you they would come." Miles knelt beside the dead man, searching his pockets. He found a folded paper orders to retrieve the woman and bring her to Grant's estate. And something else, a small tintype photograph of a little girl, dark-haired and solemn, holding a cloth doll. "Little Feather," Ayanna whispered, taking the photograph with trembling hands. "She's alive." Miles stood, his decision made. The world he tried to leave behind had found him. The past he tried to bury had resurfaced. There would be no more running. "Pack whatever you can carry," he told Ayanna. "We leave in an hour." "Where are we going?" she asked, still clutching the photograph. Miles glanced at Eagle Eye, who stood in the doorway, observing silently. "To war," Miles answered simply. "Again." The sun was setting over the desert, painting the landscape in blood-red hue. As darkness fell, 3 riders left the ranch, heading not toward Redstone Gulch, but deeper into the wilderness, where the shadows would hide them and give them time to plan. Behind them, the ranch house burned, a beacon in the night, a signal that Miles McAllister was done hiding. The battle for Ayanna's daughter, for the Apache documents, for justice in a lawless land, had begun. And this time, Miles wasn't fighting for a cause he didn't believe in, or for a government that used him as a weapon. This time, he was fighting for redemption. The desert at night belonged to ghosts and memories. Miles had learned this during his first weeks in Arizona, when sleep eluded him, and he would walk under stars so bright they seemed to press down on him. The vastness made a man feel small, insignificant. It also made his sins seem smaller specks of dust in an infinite landscape. But not tonight. Tonight the weight of the past rode with them, 3 silhouettes moving through darkness, following game trails and dry creek beds to avoid leaving tracks. The burning ranch behind them cast an orange glow on the horizon, visible for miles. A message to Grant. The game had changed. Miles led the way. Ayanna rode in the middle, and Eagle Eye brought up the rear, his keen eyes constantly scanning for pursuit. They had been riding for hours, the horses tired but steady. Ayanna swayed slightly in the saddle, her wounds making the journey painful, but she hadn't complained once. Finally, as the eastern sky began to lighten, Miles guided them into a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep on either side, providing shelter from both sun and watching eyes. "We'll rest here," he announced, dismounting stiffly. Eagle Eye nodded approval. "Good choice. Water nearby." He pointed to a small seep at the base of the canyon wall, where moisture gathered in a shallow pool. They established camp with practiced efficiency. Miles and Eagle Eye working in silent coordination that spoke of years spent in wilderness, Ayanna following their lead, despite her exhaustion. No fire was lit. It was too dangerous. As the horses drank and grazed on sparse vegetation, the 3 travelers sat in the shadow of a boulder, sharing jerky and hardtack from Miles's provisions. "Grant will have men searching by now," Ayanna said, breaking the silence. "They'll find the body at your ranch." "That was the point," Miles replied. "Let them waste time searching there while we move in the other direction." "And where exactly are we going?" Ayanna asked, her eyes moving between Miles and Eagle Eye. Miles looked to the Apache, deferring the question. Eagle Eye pulled the buckskin-wrapped map fragment from his saddlebag. "We need the other pieces of this map to find what Grant seeks." "Your father found one piece. Where is it now?" Ayanna's hand unconsciously moved to the small pocket where she kept her daughter's drawing. "With Little Feather. Hidden in her doll, but I don't know where Little Feather is." "Grant's estate," Miles said. "According to Doc Sullivan, that's where he keeps special guests. It is heavily guarded," Eagle Eye added. "Many men with guns, stone walls, like a fortress." Ayanna's face fell. "Then how do we get to her?" Miles leaned forward, his voice low but determined. "We don't attack directly. That's suicide. We need information first, then a plan." He turned to Eagle Eye. "You said Grant is looking for documents proving Apache land rights. Why? To destroy them?" Eagle Eye said simply, "The treaties give my people claim to land that holds gold and copper. With the documents gone, there is no proof. The government can take what it wants." "And the gold?" Miles pressed. "Payment from the Union Army to the Apache for safe passage during the war. Hidden with the documents for safekeeping." Eagle Eye's expression darkened. "Many died protecting these secrets, including my son." The revelation hung in the air. Ayanna reached out briefly, touching Eagle Eye's weathered hand. "I'm sorry." The Apache nodded, accepting her sympathy with dignity. Miles stood, pacing the small area of their camp. "So, Grant wants the gold and needs to destroy the documents. We need to rescue Little Feather and get the map piece she has." He stopped, looking at Eagle Eye. "You have a piece. Ayanna's daughter has a piece. Is there more?" "One more," Eagle Eye confirmed. "Held by a man in Redstone Gulch, a banker named Holloway." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Why would a banker have part of an Apache treasure map?" "Because he was once a Union officer," Eagle Eye explained. "Captain James Holloway. He helped hide the gold and documents during the war. When fighting ended, he stayed, became part of the town." "And Grant doesn't know he has it?" Ayanna asked. "Grant suspects, but cannot move against a respected banker without proof." Eagle Eye's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Unlike a newspaper man or a school teacher, some people are too powerful to simply disappear." Miles resumed pacing. "So, we need to contact this Holloway, see if he'll help us." "And how do we do that without alerting Grant's men?" Ayanna asked. "They'll be watching for us in town." Miles turned to her, a grim smile on his face. "We don't go as ourselves. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here." Redstone Gulch's First National Bank stood imposing on Allen Street, its stone facade a statement of permanence in a town built largely of wood. Inside, behind a polished desk in a private office, James Holloway reviewed ledgers with the careful attention that had made him one of the territory's most successful bankers. At 62, Holloway retained the rigid posture of his military days. His beard was neatly trimmed, white against his tan skin, his suit impeccable despite the desert heat. A gold watch chain draped across his vest, connecting to a timepiece that had been with him since Antietam. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called, not looking up. His secretary, a young man with carefully combed hair, opened the door. "Sir, there's an Apache here to see you. Says he's selling horses." Holloway frowned. "I'm not in the market for horses." Roberts. "Yes, sir. That's what I told him. But he insisted you'd want to see these particular horses. Said something about them being descendants of Sherman's mount." Holloway's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly alert. "Sherman's mount, you say?" "Yes, sir. That's what he said." Holloway closed the ledger deliberately. "Send him in." Moments later, Eagle Eye entered, dressed in simple clothing, leading a bay gelding that Holloway recognized immediately as a cavalry-bred animal. The Apache's face betrayed nothing as he nodded respectfully. "Mr. Holloway, I bring horses of exceptional bloodline." Holloway dismissed the secretary with a wave. When the door closed, he spoke quietly. "I know you. You're Shadow Walker's son." Eagle Eye nodded once. "And you are Captain Holloway, who helped my father hide what must not be found." Holloway's shoulders tensed. "That was a long time ago. Why come to me now?" "Because Grant seeks what was hidden. He has part of the map. Others have other parts." Eagle Eye's voice remained level. "The time has come to either unite the pieces or destroy them all." Holloway stood abruptly, moving to the window. He checked the street below before pulling the curtains closed. "Grant's been asking questions. Subtle at first, then less so." The banker's voice hardened. "2 weeks ago, my house was broken into. Nothing was taken, but my study was searched thoroughly." "Did he find what he sought?" Holloway gave a short, humorless laugh. "No. I learned in the war never to keep valuable intelligence where others might expect it. He returned to his desk, unlocking a drawer. I've been waiting for this day, dreading it, if I'm honest. From the drawer, he removed a small key, which he pressed into Eagle Eye's palm. Safe deposit box number 27, the bank across the street, not this one. Holloway's eyes met Eagle Eye's. Too obvious to keep it here. The map piece is inside, along with letters from your father that prove the treaty's legitimacy. Eagle Eye closed his fingers around the key. You have honored your promise to my father. I'm an old man now, Holloway said quietly. Too old to fight another war, but there's a Remington rifle and ammunition in the box as well. My contribution to your cause. We thank you, Eagle Eye said. But we need more than weapons. We need to know about Grant's estate, his defenses, where he might keep a child prisoner. Holloway's eyebrows rose. A child? Grant has taken a little girl to control her mother, who has another piece of the map. The banker's face darkened with anger. That crosses a line even Grant shouldn't dare. He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a rolled paper. This is a survey map of the county. Grant's estate is here. About 3 miles east of town, he spread the map on his desk, pointing to a large property marked with the name Grant. Main house is stone, 2 stories with a cellar beneath. Guards patrol the perimeter day and night. Holloway's finger traced the outline. But there's a weakness. The water supply comes from this creek through pipes that enter the cellar. The intake is here, hidden in a stand of cottonwoods. A man could follow the pipe, and though it would be a tight fit, Eagle Eye studied the map intently, memorizing every detail. One more thing, Holloway said, lowering his voice further. Grant has a special guest arriving tomorrow. Some government man from back east. Rumors say he's coming about the Apache land dispute. Could be coincidence. There are no coincidences in war, Eagle Eye finished. When does this man arrive? Noon stage from Tucson. Eagle Eye nodded, committing this to memory as well. We are in your debt, Captain. Holloway shook his head. I made a promise to your father. The debt was mine. He hesitated, then added, if you need a place to stay, somewhere safe. I have a line shack on my cattle property. No one goes there this time of year. It's here. He marked a spot on the map. Your generosity will not be forgotten, Eagle Eye said carefully, folding the map and tucking it away. As the Apache turned to leave, Holloway called after him softly, tell whoever's with you, Grant is not just a corrupt general. There's something wrong with the man, something broken. He enjoys causing pain. Be careful. Eagle Eye nodded once more, then slipped out the door, leading the horse. Just another Native American doing business in town. Outside, he passed a woman in a simple dress and bonnet, her face partially obscured, carrying a basket of eggs. Ayanna in disguise, on her way to gather information in the town market. Neither acknowledged the other as they went about their separate missions. Miles waited at the rendezvous point, a small grove of mesquite trees a mile outside town. He changed his appearance as much as possible, shaved his beard, trimmed his hair, exchanged his usual clothes for the garb of a traveling salesman. The transformation wouldn't fool anyone who knew him well, but it might prevent casual recognition. As he waited, he cleaned his rifle methodically, the familiar routine calming his mind. The weapon was more than a tool to him. It was an extension of himself, a reminder of skills he had hoped never to use again. Movement caught his eye, Ayanna approaching on foot, her basket now full of supplies along with the eggs. She moved with purpose, though he could see the strain of her injuries in the stiffness of her gait. Any trouble? He asked as she reached him. She shook her head. No one looked twice at me. Just another woman shopping. She set down the basket, revealing bread, cheese, and a bottle of whiskey beneath the eggs. I overheard things in the market. People talking about a fire at a ranch west of town and about General Grant offering a reward for information about a woman matching my description. Miles nodded grimly. Expected as much. What about Little Feather? Any word? Ayanna's composure faltered slightly. Nothing specific, but I spoke to a Mexican woman who works as a laundress for Grant's estate. She confirmed there's a child there, a little girl kept in a room on the second floor, not allowed outside. Hope and fear warred in her expression. Miles placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, an awkward gesture of comfort from a man unaccustomed to offering solace. "That's good news," he said. "Means she's alive, and we know where to find her." Ayanna nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes. Now we just have to get her out of a fortress guarded by armed men." She attempted a smile. Simple. Miles almost smiled back, surprised by her resilience. This woman had endured torture, separation from her child, and the murder of her husband, yet still found the strength for irony. "Eagle Eye should be back soon," he said, returning to his rifle. "Then we'll make a plan." They waited in companionable silence, each lost in thought. After a while, Ayanna spoke again, her voice softer. "That first night, when you sat outside my room, you were guarding me, weren't you? Making sure I was safe." Miles continued cleaning his rifle, not meeting her eyes, just being cautious. "No one's done that for me in a long time. Watched over me." She looked down at her hands. "Not since my father died." Miles said nothing, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "He was a good man, my father," Ayanna continued. "Believed in justice, in standing up for what's right. It got him killed." Her voice hardened. "Grant's men beat him to death in an alley behind the newspaper office. Made it look like a robbery." "I'm sorry," Miles said, the words feeling inadequate. Ayanna raised her eyes to his. "When they brought me to Grant after my father died, I thought he'd have me killed, too. Instead, her hand moved unconsciously to her back, where the brand lay hidden. He said he was marking me so I'd remember my place." Miles's hand stilled on the rifle. "We'll make him pay for that." "It's not about vengeance," Ayanna said, though her eyes told a different story. "It's about Little Feather, about making sure she has a future." Before Miles could respond, Eagle Eye appeared silently from among the trees, leading his horse. "Success?" Miles asked, standing. The Apache nodded, producing the key and the folded map. "Holloway has kept his word. The map piece is in a bank vault, and he provided information about Grant's estate." He quickly related what he'd learned, the layout of the property, the water pipe entrance, the coming arrival of a government official. "This changes things," Miles said, thinking aloud. "If a federal official is coming, Grant will be distracted. Security might be focused on impressing the visitor rather than watching for intruders. Or he could double his guards," Ayanna countered. "Holloway offered us shelter," Eagle Eye said. "A line shack on his property. We can rest there. Make proper plans." Miles nodded. "Good. We'll retrieve the map piece from the bank, then head to the shack. After dark, I'll scout Grant's estate, see these water pipes for myself." As they prepared to move out, Ayanna suddenly froze, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Riders," she whispered. "Coming this way." Miles immediately dropped to one knee, rifle ready, scanning the horizon. 3 horsemen approached from the direction of Redstone Gulch, moving at a steady trot. "Grant's men?" Ayanna asked, fear edging her voice. Eagle Eye shook his head. "Sheriff and deputies. Regular patrol, perhaps. Or looking for us," Miles said grimly. "Mount up, casual pace. Act like we belong here." They rode out from the shelter of the trees, angling away from the approaching lawmen, but not so sharply as to appear suspicious. Miles tipped his hat as the distance between the groups narrowed, adopting the easy manner of a traveling man. The sheriff slowed his horse, studying them with narrowed eyes. A heavy-set man with a drooping mustache, he wore his authority like an ill-fitting coat, uncomfortable, but determined to make it work. "Afternoon," he called. "You folks heading to Redstone Gulch?" "Just leaving, actually," Miles replied amicably. "Got business in Bisbee." The sheriff's gaze lingered on Ayanna, whose face remained partially hidden by her bonnet. "The lady with you?" "My sister," Miles lied smoothly. "Coming to help with my children after my wife's passing." The sheriff seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Sorry for your loss." His eyes shifted to Eagle Eye. "He with you too?" "Guide and tracker," Miles said. "Not familiar with this territory myself." One of the deputies leaned toward the sheriff, whispering something. The sheriff frowned, then addressed Miles again. "Mind if I ask your name, mister?" Miles felt tension coil in his stomach, but kept his expression neutral. "Samuel Parker, Cincinnati originally." "Mr. Parker," We're looking for some folks who might have passed this way. A woman, injured, and 2 men. 1 white, 1 Indian. The sheriff's hand rested casually near his holster. You seen anyone like that? Miles shook his head. Can't say we have. Road's been quiet. He gestured vaguely westward. Saw some smoke yesterday, though. Looked like a fire some ways out. The sheriff nodded. Ranch fire. Suspicious circumstances. He studied Miles a moment longer, then apparently decided they weren't worth further questioning. Well, safe travels to Bisbee, Mr. Parker. Appreciate, Sheriff. The lawman rode on toward Redstone Gulch, and Miles released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close, Ayanna murmured when the riders were out of earshot. It's going to get closer, Miles replied. Let's move. Bank first, then the line shack. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Holloway had promised. A map fragment on aged parchment, letters written in Apache and English detailing the treaties, and a Remington rifle with ammunition. Eagle Eye examined the map piece with reverence, carefully placing it with the fragment he already possessed. 2 pieces of 3, he said, almost complete. They reached the line shack as dusk was settling over the desert. The small structure was basic but solid. A single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. Ayanna immediately set about making the place habitable, her teacher's instinct for order asserting itself. Eagle Eye tended the horses while Miles inventoried their weapons and supplies. As night fell, they shared a simple meal of beans, jerky, and coffee. The domestic normalcy of it felt strange to Miles, who had grown accustomed to solitary evenings. Stranger still was how comfortable it felt despite the circumstances. After eating, Eagle Eye spread the combined map fragments on the table. Even incomplete, a picture was emerging: landmarks, directions, and what appeared to be the location of a cave in a distinctive rock formation. The third piece would show the exact location, Eagle Eye explained. Without it, we could search for months and never find the entrance. Miles studied the map thoughtfully. Grant doesn't have the other pieces. He doesn't know we've combined these 2. That gives us an advantage. Only if we can get Little Feather out, Ayanna said firmly. That's the priority. Miles nodded. Agreed. I'll scout the estate tonight. Assess the water pipe entry Holloway mentioned. I should come with you, Eagle Eye said. Miles shook his head. Too risky for both of us to go. If I'm caught, you and Ayanna will need to find another way. He began checking his weapons: a knife, his revolver, and a smaller derringer that could be hidden in his boot. Ayanna watched him prepare, concern evident in her expression. Be careful, she said softly. Little Feather needs all of us. Miles met her gaze, struck by the genuine worry in her eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had cared whether he returned from a mission. The feeling was both comforting and unsettling. I'll be back before dawn, he promised. The night was clear and cool as Miles made his way toward Grant's estate, moving silently through the desert landscape. The moon, nearly full, cast enough light to navigate by while still allowing shadows for concealment. Grant's estate came into view shortly before midnight, a sprawling property surrounded by a high stone wall. The main house rose like a fortress in the center, windows glowing with lamplight despite the late hour. Miles circled the perimeter, staying well back, counting guards and noting patrol patterns. 8 men that he could see, moving in pairs, each circuit taking approximately 20 minutes. Following Holloway's directions, he located the creek and the stand of cottonwoods that concealed the water intake. The area was less heavily patrolled, with guards passing only once per hour. Miles waited for a patrol to pass, then moved quickly to the cottonwoods. The water intake was there, as described, a metal grate covering a pipe approximately 2 feet in diameter. The grate was secured with a padlock, old and rusted. He examined it carefully. The lock would be easy enough to pick or break. The pipe itself was large enough for a man to crawl through, though it would be a tight fit. Water flowed through the bottom, about 6 inches deep enough to make the journey uncomfortable, but not impossible. Miles traced the pipe's path with his eyes. It disappeared into the ground, presumably running underground to the house's cellar, a viable entry point, just as Holloway had suggested. As he prepared to withdraw, voices reached him, guards approaching. Miles pressed himself against the trunk of a cottonwood, becoming one with the shadows. "New girl's a pretty one," one guard was saying. "Grant's got her all cleaned up for the government man's visit." "Lucky bastard," the second guard replied. "We risk our necks out here, and he gets all the comforts." "Speaking of comfort, I heard the little girl's been asking for her mother again, crying at night. Grant should just get rid of her. Too much trouble." "Nah, he needs her. Says the mother will come for her eventually. Then he'll have them both." The first guard laughed. "And the map piece. Don't forget that. Grant's obsessed with finding that treasure. You believe it exists?" "Don't know. Don't care. Long as Grant keeps paying, I'll help him chase ghosts." Their voices faded as they moved past the cottonwoods, continuing their patrol. Miles remained motionless until he was certain they were gone, then silently made his way back into the desert. His mind worked as he traveled, processing what he'd learned. The water pipe was viable. Little Feather was definitely in the house. And Grant was expecting Ayanna to come for her daughter had set a trap. But Grant didn't know about Eagle Eye or about Miles himself. He was expecting a desperate mother, not a former cavalry scout and an Apache warrior. That misplaced confidence would be his weakness. Dawn was breaking as Miles returned to the line shack. He found Ayanna awake, sitting by the window, a cup of coffee cooling before her. Relief washed over her face when she saw him. "You're back," she said simply. "Told you I would be." Miles accepted the cup of coffee she offered, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "Where's Eagle Eye?" "Said we needed fresh meat." Ayanna studied his face. "What did you find?" Miles related his discoveries: the layout, the guards, the water pipe entrance, and the conversation he'd overheard. "Little Feather's there," he confirmed. "Alive, and well enough to be asking for you." Ayanna closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "And Grant's using her as bait, waiting for me." "Yes, but he's not expecting us to come in from below." Miles outlined his plan, using the water pipe to enter the cellar, then finding Little Feather and extracting her during the government official's visit when attention would be diverted. Ayanna listened intently, asking occasional questions. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "It could work," she finally said. "But it's incredibly dangerous." "No more dangerous than leaving Little Feather there," Miles pointed out. "Grant knows you have a map piece. Eventually, he'll decide Little Feather isn't enough leverage and come looking for you directly." Ayanna nodded, her resolve visibly strengthening. "When do we move?" "Tomorrow. When the government man arrives." Miles drained his coffee cup. "We'll need supplies, rope, dark clothing, weapons you can conceal." "I can shoot," Ayanna said, anticipating his next question. "My father taught me after he started receiving threats." Miles nodded, unsurprised. "Good. You'll need to." Eagle Eye returned shortly after, bringing 2 rabbits he'd snared. As he prepared them for cooking, Miles outlined the plan. The Apache listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "It is a good plan," he said when Miles finished, "but I would make one change. The woman should not enter the house." Ayanna immediately protested. "It's my daughter in there." "Precisely," Eagle Eye said calmly. "Your emotions will make you vulnerable, and if Grant sees you, he will know something is wrong. His men are looking for a mother, not 2 men. Miles considered this. "He's right, Ayanna. You'd be recognized more easily than either of us." "I won't stay behind while you risk your lives for my daughter," Ayanna insisted, her voice rising. "Not behind," Eagle Eye clarified. "Outside, with horses ready. When we find the child, we will need to leave quickly. Someone must secure our escape." Ayanna looked from Eagle Eye to Miles, clearly torn between maternal instinct and tactical necessity. "He's making sense," Miles said gently. "We need you, just not inside." After a long moment, Ayanna nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But if anything goes wrong, if Little Feather is in danger, I'm coming in after her. Understood?" Miles met her determined gaze and saw not just a mother's love, but a fighter's resolve. This woman had endured Grant's cruelty and emerged not broken, but hardened like steel tempered in fire. "Understood," he agreed. They spent the remainder of the day preparing cleaning weapons, gathering supplies, studying the map of Grant's estate that Eagle Eye had memorized from Holloway's survey. As the evening approached, a strange calm settled over the trio. The calm that comes before battle, when all preparations are made and only waiting remain. After dinner, Ayanna excused herself to step outside. Miles found her later sitting on a fallen log, staring at the stars. Without a word, he sat beside her, offering a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. She accepted it with a small smile of thanks. "When I was a girl," she said after a while, "my father taught me the constellations. Said they were stories written in the sky, unchanging no matter what happened on Earth." She took a sip of the coffee. "I've been looking for Orion. That was Little Feather's favorite, but it's the wrong season." Miles looked up at the vast canopy of stars. "I never learned their names. Just used them for navigation." "Always practical?" Ayanna observed, a hint of teasing in her voice. "Had to be. In my line of work, practical kept you alive." "And what about now?" she asked, turning to study his profile in the moonlight. "Is this practical? Helping a woman you barely know rescue her daughter from a powerful man?" Miles considered the question. "No," he admitted. "Not practical at all." "Then why?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. Miles took a long drink of his coffee, weighing his words. "Because sometimes practical isn't right," he finally said. "And because I've spent too long hiding from what I've done. Maybe it's time to do something worth doing." Ayanna's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers cool against his skin. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being impractical." Miles didn't pull away, allowing the contact, the human connection he'd denied himself for so long. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, each lost in thoughts of the day to come. Inside the shack, Eagle Eye observed them through the window, a knowing expression crossing his face. Then he turned away, giving them their privacy, and continued preparing for battle. Tomorrow they would confront Grant. Tomorrow they would attempt to rescue Little Feather. Tomorrow, the past and present would collide in ways none of them could fully predict. But tonight, for this brief moment, there was peace in the desert. A fragile, fleeting peace that Miles hadn't known in years. "Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you." The government man arrived precisely at noon as scheduled. The stagecoach rolled into Redstone Gulch in a cloud of dust, drawing the attention of townspeople and Grant's men alike. From their vantage point on a hill overlooking the town, Miles, Ayanna, and Eagle Eye watched through a spyglass as a tall figure in an Eastern suit descended from the coach, greeted by General Grant himself. "Right on time," Miles murmured. "Grant's occupied. Now we move." They had spent the morning positioning themselves, establishing a camp in a dry wash half a mile from Grant's estate. The horses were hidden in a stand of scrub oak, saddled and ready for a quick departure. Ayanna, dressed in dark clothing with a bandana ready to cover her face, would wait with the mounts, while Miles and Eagle Eye infiltrated the estate. "Remember," Miles told her as they prepared to part ways, "if we're not back by sunset, take the horses and ride for Tucson. Find the federal marshal there. Tell him everything." Ayanna shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving without Little Feather." "You might have to," Miles said, his voice gentle but insistent. "Little Feather needs her mother alive, not captured or killed in a rescue attempt." Ayanna looked as though she wanted to argue further, but instead pulled something from her pocket, the small drawing her daughter had made. "Give this to her," she said, pressing it into Miles's hand. "So she knows I'm here, that I came for her." Miles nodded carefully, tucking the drawing into his shirt pocket. "We'll bring her back, I promise." The sincerity in his voice surprised even him. Miles McAllister, who had spent years avoiding promises he couldn't keep, now made one that mattered more than any before. Eagle Eye approached, carrying the Remington rifle Holloway had provided. "It is time," he said simply. With a final nod to Ayanna, the two men departed, making their way toward the water intake pipe Miles had located the night before. They moved silently, using the terrain for cover, avoiding the patrol routes Miles had memorized. Reaching the cottonwoods without incident, they found the water pipe as Miles had described. Eagle Eye produced a set of slim metal tools, lockpicks fashioned from horseshoe nails. "My father taught me," he explained at Miles's questioning look. Said understanding the white man's locks was important. The rusted padlock yielded quickly to Eagle Eye's skilled hands. They removed the grate, revealing the dark tunnel of the pipe, stretching before them. "I'll go first," Miles said, pulling the bandana up to cover his nose and mouth. "Wait for my signal before following." Eagle Eye nodded, taking up a position where he could watch for patrols, while Miles entered the pipe. The tunnel was even tighter than Miles had anticipated, forcing him to crawl on his stomach through 6 inches of cold flowing water. The darkness was absolute, the sound of his own breathing echoing metallically around him. He fought down a surge of claustrophobia, focusing on moving forward inch by inch. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, the pipe began to slope upward. Eventually, it terminated in another grate, this one secured from the inside. Miles pressed against it experimentally. It moved slightly, but was held in place by some mechanism he couldn't see in the darkness. Withdrawing a small knife from his boot, Miles worked it through the grate, feeling for a latch or lock. His fingers, numbed by the cold water, fumbled slightly before finding what he sought, a simple hook and eye, securing the grate. With careful manipulation, he managed to lift the hook free. The grate swung open, and Miles emerged into a dim cellar, dripping water onto a stone floor. He quickly oriented himself. Stone walls lined with shelves of provisions, a wooden staircase leading upward, a single lamp burning low on a far wall. No guards were visible. Miles crossed to the staircase and listened intently. Hearing nothing, he returned to the pipe and gave a low whistle, the signal for Eagle Eye to follow. While waiting, Miles took stock of his surroundings more thoroughly. The cellar was larger than he had expected, with several barrels of what smelled like whiskey, crates of supplies, and a locked cabinet that likely contained valuables. A second, smaller staircase led to what appeared to be a separate exit, perhaps to the outside or to another part of the house. Eagle Eye emerged from the pipe with considerably more grace than Miles had managed, seeming barely damp despite the water. He surveyed the cellar with sharp eyes, then pointed to the smaller staircase. "Servants' access," he whispered, "less likely to be guarded." Miles nodded agreement, and they moved silently toward the stairs. At the top, a simple wooden door stood closed, but not locked. Miles eased it open a crack, peering into what proved to be a kitchen. A Mexican woman worked alone, kneading dough on a large table, her back to the door. Miles exchanged a glance with Eagle Eye, weighing their options. They needed information about Little Feather's exact location, but revealing themselves risked exposure. The decision was made for them when the woman turned, catching sight of the partially open door. Her eyes widened in alarm. Before she could cry out, Eagle Eye stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Miles caught only fragments. "No harm. The child. Help us." To his surprise, the woman's expression shifted from fear to cautious interest. She responded in Spanish, too quickly for Miles to follow, but he recognized the tone of someone providing information. Eagle Eye listened intently, then nodded. "Thanks." The woman made a shooing motion toward a side door, then returned to her bread-making as if nothing had happened. "The child is upstairs," Eagle Eye whispered as they slipped through the indicated door, into a narrow hallway. "Second floor. East wing. Room with blue door. 1 guard." "The woman's helping us?" Miles asked, surprised. "Grant took her son 2 months ago. Sold him to work in mines." Eagle Eye's expression darkened. "She has been waiting for a chance at vengeance." They moved through the house with extreme caution, using service corridors where possible. Voices echoed from distant rooms, Grant entertaining his government guest, servants going about their duties. Twice they had to duck into empty rooms to avoid detection. Finally, they reached the east wing, climbing a back staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway stretched before them, doors on either side, one painted a distinctive blue halfway down the corridor. As Eagle Eye had warned, a guard stood outside, looking bored but alert. He was armed with a revolver, his posture suggesting a man prepared for a long, dull assignment. Miles and Eagle Eye withdrew to confer. Distraction, Eagle Eye suggested. Miles considered, then shook his head. Too risky, might alert others. He withdrew the derringer from his boot. I'll take him. Quick and quiet. Eagle Eye nodded, positioning himself to watch the hallway in both directions. Miles approached silently, derringer concealed in his palm. The guard noticed him too late, reaching for his weapon as Miles pressed the small gun to his ribs. Not a sound, Miles warned. There's a second gun aimed at your back. It was a bluff, but the guard believed it, freezing in place. The girl in that room, is she alone? The guard nodded, swallowing hard. Keys. The guard slowly reached into his pocket and produced a ring of keys. Smart man, Miles said. Now turn around, hands on the wall. As the guard complied, Miles brought the butt of the derringer down hard on the base of his skull. The man crumpled unconsciously to the floor. Eagle Eye moved swiftly to help Miles drag the guard into a nearby empty room where they bound and gagged him with strips torn from bedsheets. Returning to the blue door, Miles tried keys until one turned in the lock. He eased the door open, unsure what to expect. The room beyond was surprisingly pleasant, spacious, well furnished with windows looking out over gardens. A little girl sat on the bed, dark-haired and solemn, clutching a cloth doll. She looked up as the door opened, fear flashing across her face. It's all right, Miles said softly, lowering his bandana. We're friends of your mother. She sent us to take you to her. The girl, Little Feather, regarded him suspiciously. Where's my mama? Waiting for you. Not far from here. Miles crouched to her level, speaking gently. She asked me to give you this. He withdrew the drawing from his pocket, offering it to her. Little Feather took it cautiously, recognition dawning in her eyes. I made this for Mama, she whispered. She kept it safe, Miles said, and now she sent it back to you so you'd know we really come from her. Little Feather studied him, then Eagle Eye, with a child's directness. Are you going to hurt the bad men? If we have to, Miles answered honestly. But right now we just want to get you back to your mother. Can you come with us? Quietly? Little Feather nodded, clutching her doll tighter. Penny comes too. Of course, Miles agreed, guessing the doll's name. Penny is very important. As Little Feather slid off the bed, Eagle Eye suddenly tensed, his head turning toward the door. Someone comes, he warned. Miles listened. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Hide, he instructed Little Feather, guiding her toward a large wardrobe. No matter what happens, stay quiet until one of us comes for you. The little girl nodded solemnly and climbed into the wardrobe with her doll. Miles closed the door, just as voices became audible in the hallway. Check on the girl, a man was saying. Grant wants her presentable for our guest. Miles and Eagle Eye exchanged glances. No time to hide. They positioned themselves on either side of the room's door, weapons ready. The door handle turned. Miles prepared to strike. But before the door could open fully, a commotion erupted elsewhere in the house, shouting, the sound of breaking glass. Then a gunshot. The person at the door hesitated, then the footsteps retreated rapidly, responding to the disturbance. Miles moved to the window, peering out cautiously. In the courtyard below, men ran toward the main entrance, weapons drawn. Something's wrong, he muttered. Eagle Eye joined him at the window. A diversion. Before Miles could respond, the answer presented itself in the form of Ayanna, riding full tilt toward the house on horseback, firing a rifle into the air. Damn it, Miles swore. She was supposed to wait. The mother grew impatient. Eagle Eye observed. Now we must adapt. Miles rapidly reassessed the situation. Ayanna's diversion would draw attention away from the East Wing temporarily, but also bring every guard on the property into alert status. New plan, he decided. We use the confusion. Take the girl out through the cellar while everyone's focused on Ayanna. Eagle Eye nodded agreement. Miles opened the wardrobe, finding Little Feather huddled inside, eyes wide with fear. Change of plans, he told her gently. Your mother's here, but we need to move quickly and stay very quiet. Can you do that? Little Feather nodded, clutching Penny the doll tightly to her chest. Miles lifted her into his arms, and together with Eagle Eye, they moved swiftly into the hallway. The house had erupted into chaos. Servants running, guards shouting orders, Grant's voice bellowing from somewhere below. They made it to the servant staircase without being spotted, descending rapidly toward the kitchen. The Mexican woman who had helped them earlier stood by the cellar door, gesturing urgently for them to hurry. "Grant's men are everywhere," she warned in accented English. "The woman outside, they are trying to capture her." Miles felt a surge of fear for Ayana, but forced himself to focus on the immediate task, getting Little Feather to safety. "Thank you," he told the woman. "If you can create more confusion, anything to keep them distracted." She nodded, a fierce smile crossing her face. "With pleasure, senor." They descended into the cellar, moving quickly toward the water pipe. Miles set Little Feather down, kneeling to explain. "This pipe leads outside. It's dark and wet, but it's our way out. I'll go first, then you follow, then my friend will come last. Can you be brave?" Little Feather looked at the pipe dubiously, then back to Miles. "Is Mama really outside?" "Yes," Miles promised, "and she's in danger because she came for you, so we need to hurry." That seemed to decide the matter for Little Feather. She nodded firmly, squaring her small shoulders. Miles was about to enter the pipe when the cellar door burst open. 2 armed men stood in the doorway, weapons raised. "Don't move," one shouted. "Grant wants the girl." Eagle Eye reacted with lightning speed, raising the Remington and firing in one fluid motion. The first guard fell, but the second managed to get off a shot before Eagle Eye's second bullet found him. The bullet struck Miles in the left shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Pain exploded through his body, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, he saw Eagle Eye checking the fallen guards, confirming they were no longer threats. Little Feather stood frozen, clutching her doll, eyes wide with terror. "It's all right," Miles gasped, fighting through the pain. "We're still going." He pressed his right hand to the wound, feeling warm blood seeping between his fingers. Eagle Eye returned to his side, examining the injury with a critical eye. "Through and through," he reported. "You can travel." "Good, because we have to." Miles straightened, wincing. More will come when they hear the shots. As if on cue, shouting erupted from above, followed by the sound of running feet. "Go," Eagle Eye said firmly. "Take the child. I will hold them here." Miles started to protest, but the Apache cut him off. "There is no time to argue. The pipe is too small for a quick escape. Someone must delay pursuit." Eagle Eye's eyes held a warrior's resolve. "I will find another way out." Miles knew he was right. With his injury slowing him, they needed time to escape through the pipe. "We'll wait at the rendezvous point," he said, "until sunset." Eagle Eye nodded once, then turned to Little Feather. "Go with him, little one. Your mother waits." Little Feather hesitated, then stepped forward and pressed Penny the doll into Eagle Eye's hands. "For luck," she said solemnly. Something flickered in the Apache's stoic expression, surprise, perhaps even tenderness. He accepted the doll with equal solemnity, then gently guided Little Feather back to Miles. "The documents are what matter," he reminded Miles. "If I do not return, find the third map piece. Complete what was started." Miles clasped the Apache's shoulder briefly, a warrior's farewell. Then he turned to the pipe, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder as he entered the dark tunnel, Little Feather following close behind. Behind them, Eagle Eye positioned himself by the cellar door, Remington rifle ready, Penny the doll tucked securely in his belt. The last thing Miles heard as he crawled deeper into the pipe was the sound of the cellar door bursting open, followed by Eagle Eye's defiant war cry and the thunder of the Remington. Then there was only darkness, the sound of water, and Little Feather's frightened breathing as they made their escape, away from Grant's estate and toward an uncertain reunion with Ayana. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. Pain has a voice. In the darkness of the water pipe, with cold water numbing his legs and blood soaking his shirt, Miles listened to that voice. It spoke of limits, of mortality, of reasons to give up. He'd heard it before on battlefields and in field hospitals, during long marches when men fell and didn't rise. But now there was another voice, small and frightened, coming from behind him. "Mister, are you okay?" Little Feather whispered, her words echoing metallically in the confined space. "I'm fine," Miles lied, pushing forward through the tunnel. Not much farther now. The pain in his shoulder flared with each movement, but he focused on the task. Get the girl out, find Ayanna, complete the mission. The simplicity of purpose kept him moving when his body wanted to stop. Light appeared ahead, the pipe's exit daylight filtering through the metal grate. Miles increased his pace, ignoring the black spots dancing at the edges of his vision. He reached the grate, finding it still loose from their entry. With a final push, he emerged into the sunlight, pulling himself onto dry ground. Little Feather followed, crawling out more easily with her smaller frame. She stood uncertainly, soaking wet and shivering, looking back toward Grant's estate with wide, frightened eyes. What about the other man? The one with the nice face? Miles struggled to his feet, pressing his hand against his wounded shoulder. He'll find another way out. He hoped he wasn't lying to the child. Gunfire erupted from the direction of the house, multiple shots in rapid succession. Miles instinctively pulled Little Feather behind the cover of a large cottonwood, scanning for threats. The commotion seemed centered on the main courtyard, where Ayanna had created her diversion. Ayanna, the thought of her galvanized him. "We need to move," he told Little Feather. "Stay close to me. Run when I run. Stop when I stop. Can you do that?" The little girl nodded solemnly, her dark eyes far too serious for a child her age. Miles was struck by how much she resembled her mother, the same determination evident even in fear. They set off, keeping low, using the sparse vegetation for cover. As they moved away from the water pipe, Miles's plan was to circle around to the rendezvous point where the horses should be waiting, assuming Ayanna had left them there before charging in on horseback. The sound of pursuit reached them before they'd gone half a mile. Men on horseback, spreading out from the estate, searching. Miles picked up Little Feather without warning, ignoring the explosion of pain in his shoulder, and sprinted for a shallow ravine he'd spotted ahead. They reached it just as riders crested a nearby hill. Miles dropped into the ravine, cradling Little Feather to cushion her fall, and pressing them both against the earth and wall. Little Feather remained remarkably silent, seeming to understand instinctively the need for absolute quiet. Hoofbeats approached, slowed, then stopped directly above them. Miles held his breath, feeling Little Feather's small body trembling against his. "See anything?" a man's voice called. "Nothing," another replied. "Could have gone east toward the rocks. Check the creek bed. Grant wants the kid alive. The others, shoot on sight." The horses moved off, but Miles remained motionless, counting to 100 before cautiously raising his head to look around. The riders had split up, moving in different directions. None appeared to be watching the ravine. "We need to keep moving," he whispered to Little Feather. "But we'll have to be very quiet and very careful." She nodded, clutching the drawing her mother had sent. Miles noticed blood on her dress, his blood, transferred when he'd carried her. "Are you hurt bad?" she asked, seeing him examine the wound. "I've had worse," he said, which was true. "Nothing that will slow us down." They continued through the ravine, which eventually deepened into a dry wash, leading roughly in the direction of their rendezvous point. The going was slow. Miles needed to check frequently for pursuers, and his strength was ebbing as blood loss took its toll. Little Feather walked beside him, uncomplaining, occasionally reaching up to hold his hand when the terrain grew difficult. Her trust humbled him, reminding him of another small hand that had once held his with similar confidence his son's, long ago. The sun was beginning its westward descent when they finally approached the stand of scrub oak where they'd left the horses. Miles approached cautiously, signaling Little Feather to remain hidden while he scouted ahead. The horses were gone. So was Ayanna. Miles fought down a surge of despair. Without mounts, their chances of escaping Grant's men diminished drastically. And Ayanna, had she been captured, killed, or had she simply been forced to flee? He returned to Little Feather, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Change of plans," he said. "We need to find a place to hide until dark." "Where's Mama?" Little Feather asked immediately, her eyes searching his face. Miles hesitated, weighing truth against comfort. "I'm not sure yet, but we'll find her." Little Feather seemed to accept this, though her small face grew even more solemn. "Is it because she came to help us? Is she in trouble?" "Your mother is very brave," Miles said, avoiding a direct answer. "And very smart. She'll be all right." He hoped that wasn't another lie. They found shelter in a small cave, formed by fallen boulders, concealed by brush and nearly invisible, unless one knew exactly where to look. Miles's scouting skills had served him well in finding it. The space was just large enough for both of them to sit comfortably, hidden from view but with a clear sightline to watch for threats or for returning friends. As they settled in to wait, Miles tore strips from his shirt to fashion a crude bandage for his shoulder. The bleeding had slowed, but the wound was beginning to show signs of infection, the skin hot and tender to the touch. Little Feather watched him work with solemn curiosity. "My papa taught me about wounds," she said suddenly. "Before the bad men hurt him." Miles looked up, surprised. "Your father taught you?" She nodded. "Papa was a newspaper man, but he knew doctor things, too. He said everyone should." She studied Miles's makeshift bandage with a critical eye. "You need clean water and honey. That's what Papa always said for bad cuts." "Your father was right," Miles said, touched by her concern. "We'll find those things when we can." "Papa's in heaven now," Little Feather continued matter-of-factly. "The bad general sent men to hurt him because Papa was writing true things the general didn't like." Miles nodded, uncertain how to respond to a child's understanding of murder. "Mama said we had to be extra careful after that," Little Feather went on. "She taught me to hide things in my doll, Penny." Her face fell. "I gave Penny to your friend to help him be brave." "That was very kind of you," Miles said gently. "Eagle Eye will take good care of Penny." Little Feather studied him intently. "Are you a good man or a bad man, mister?" The question, delivered with a child's directness, caught Miles off guard. He considered how to answer. "I've done both good and bad things," he said finally. "But right now, I'm trying to do good." Little Feather seemed to accept this. "Mama says most people are mixed up. Not all good or all bad." "Your mother is wise," Miles said. "She's a teacher," Little Feather replied, as if that explained everything. Then, after a pause, "I'm scared for her." Miles reached out gently, resting his hand on her small shoulder. "I know, but we'll find her. I promise." As the afternoon wore on, Little Feather eventually dozed off, exhaustion claiming her despite the circumstances. Miles remained vigilant, watching the desert landscape for any sign of pursuit or of Ayanna and Eagle Eye. His thoughts turned to the Apache warrior. Eagle Eye had stayed behind, facing unknown odds to give them time to escape. The sacrifice reminded Miles of companions lost in war, men who'd given their lives for their brothers in arms. He hadn't expected to find such brotherhood again, especially not with a man whose people he had once helped destroy. Life had a strange way of bringing the past full circle. As shadows lengthened across the desert, Miles's vigilance was rewarded. Movement caught his eye, a lone rider approaching cautiously from the direction of Grant's estate. Miles tensed, reaching for his revolver, then relaxed as he recognized the distinctive silhouette. Ayanna. She rode slowly, scanning the terrain, clearly searching for them. Miles hesitated, wary of exposing their position in case she was being followed. He watched her for several minutes, confirming she was alone before gently waking Little Feather. "Your mother's here," he whispered. Little Feather was instantly alert, scrambling to the entrance of their hiding place. Miles had to hold her back. "Wait, we need to be careful." He took a small mirror from his pocket, a scout's tool for signaling, and angled it to catch the setting sun, sending a brief flash of light in Ayanna's direction. She reined in her horse, immediately searching for the source. Miles flashed the mirror again, then emerged cautiously from cover, keeping Little Feather behind him until he was certain it was safe. Ayanna spotted him and spurred her horse forward. As she drew closer, Miles could see she was injured. A bloodied bandage wrapped around her upper arm, her face scratched and dirt-streaked,